Good morning. Okay, I wanted to talk today a little bit about refinishing and bluing hands. It seems to be one of the most frequently asked questions in our groups, and I know some of you are perfectly capable of refinishing hands and bluing. I tell people all the time, it's really not that difficult. It's a simple process, and especially the bluing. I'll walk you through some of the tools and equipment and the process itself. I'll try to be as concise as possible, but I'm not a videographer or a teacher, so bear with me. I always tell people that the secret to really getting a good blued finish is the polish. And you really have to polish to perfection, and before you start the bluing heat treatment process, your hands have to be as clean as possible, absolutely perfectly clean, and you're good to go. So I'll run through some of the stuff, and we'll walk through the process a little bit and go from there. All right, let's run through some of the stuff. That's the bluing pan that I use currently right there. I've got a little tray on the top of it that's got holes in it, you can see, and that's nice for screws and sometimes for hands, but you really want a nice even heat distribution, so slow is better, and you want things to lay flat. So inside of that is full of bronze shavings, actually, which I don't know if everyone has access to. If you happen to have some brass shavings, bronze stuff from a grinder or anything clean, that'd be great. I got this from a friend's foundry, actually. Just cut off material. I need some little wipes to make sure it's nice and clean and dry. The cork, that's what I like to polish on, and I have some holes in that so that I can lay the hands, nice and flat in there while I work on them. And I usually just hold them down with my pegwood. Toothpick, pegwood, whatever you want to use, that's fantastic. Naphtha is for cleaning them off. We've got our trusty alcohol lamp there. Some selection of water and oil here in the background that's for different polishing or cutting procedures. Most of the time, if you have hands that are in very good condition that just have some color loss, you can just polish them. And for most of my polishing here for small items, I just use a trusty Dremel, and I have a couple of them at my bench here. One's with a handpiece. I got a stationary one, cordless one there, and I use them for all kinds of little things around the bench. I've never invested in a fancy Fordham unit. Of course, have a much nicer bench polisher out in the garage, but not in here. So, and I also have, you'll notice there's some paper abrasive here and a stone. This is the 10,000 grit polishing stone, and you can get those in sets for like knife sharpeners and stuff that run through all of the grits they're fantastic for everything from screwdrivers to polishing. You know, you got a nice selection of grits and some good stones there. The paper is inexpensive, and if you get the wet dry, like automotive silicon carbide paper, 7,000 grit, you can get some nice high grits that'll give you a nice polish. You can add diamond powder to your mix. You might want to use that on a glass plate to polish with. Yeah, all the tricks. So if your hands have big gouges or scratches or pits like this, yeah, that's what you're gonna need. You may even need to go to some files or some other, I got some junk files right up to very fine Swiss and German files in there that it's a little hard to make out, but you gotta get those pits out, and then you'll have to work the metal back to a perfect shine. And that's that. Okay, maybe not quite that. I wanted to add, if you're using the paper, you really want to glue it down to a surface so that it lays perfectly flat when you get it wet, of course. And then the other thing too is with paper, you can make whatever kind of shape you want. So for instance, I use little craft sticks and I just glue the paper to them for polishing screw heads or other round shape things. The nice thing about that is you can cut them to any shape you need and make them virtually as small as you want. The paper does have a certain amount of cushion to it. It's not a perfectly rigid surface, so you'll get rolling and you'll turn your edges over if you have sharp edges that you want to preserve. So you want to keep that in mind, but gluing it down can make a big difference. I have a set of stones, actually small tiles, 4 by 4 inch tiles, I think, that I glue a series of abrasives onto for polishing as well. So there's another little trick. Okay, so I'm gonna start on that boss and working that down a little bit. I'm just gonna explore and see how deep those pits really run. We'll give it some rubby rubs with the 1000 grit and we'll see where that goes. Put a little touch of oil on there. I don't know if you can see that. I'm gonna just hold that down. You can feel it nice and flat on there. I'll be very careful to keep it at the edge and not ride up the stem. It is a little bit proud, so you don't have to worry too much, but you want to be light and try to keep your index finger centered over it so that it keeps it nice and even and flat on the top. Let's see if that is... I kind of think I probably should have started with like a 800 or even a 6 something. Those pits are maybe never going to come out. So let's see where we're at here. Give that a little wipe. So I got a little careless while I was looking back towards the camera, and I did rub the stem, but at this point it's not a problem because I'm going to be rebluing everything, obviously. But let's see here. I guess it's not going to focus that well on there. Not that close, Jack. Yep, I can't focus this. Well, I'll show you later. Honestly, another minute or two with that 1000 grit, and it's probably gonna be there. It looks pretty good. There might be some little remnants of pits left on there, but in this instance, I don't think we're gonna worry too much about it. In just a minute here, and then I'll start going up through the grits to make sure it's got a nice polish on it. Okay, so I've got that rust and oxide spot worked down pretty good. There are still a couple little remnants of it, but it's not so bad. And now I feel like we're at a stage where we can polish this a little. So I use a polishing stick that is for steel, the black one. And let's go over this before I turn this machine on. I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see this. I use my pegwood and I hold the hand. When I'm doing the boss end of it, I lay it across the tip, like right behind the tip, flat generally, and hold it down. And then for the rest of it, I just put the tip into the hole of the hand and I hold it so. You always want to keep the rotation of your tool working down it. Don't come at the tip into the turn of the tool, obviously. Sticking my head right in the camera, sorry about that. Okay, our minute hand has a pretty nice polish on it, which is pretty impossible to get focused in the camera. So anyway, we'll put this in the naphtha to dissolve any of that waxy residue from the polishing. Agitate that a little bit so that it cleans it. I don't really find it necessary to run it through the whole cleaner process, but I do use these little glass chemical jars with to just agitate it a little bit, and then we'll let it soak for a minute while we work on the hour hand. Okay, so we did a little bit of finishing on that boss with some silicon carbide paper on sticks. I think took it up to a 7,000 grit on there. You can see there's still some pits, especially on that boss. There they are. Gotta catch the light just right to see them. We've got a pretty good polish overall. There is another pit there in the hour hand spade you can see there, and also a little bit, just point these out here, there's a little bit up in here and there, a little tiny bit on the neck in here and over here I think too. So we've got pitting on both of these hands that's pretty severe, but you could work that out without very much work at all. I would attack that probably with the file and then some abrasive paper on a stick shaped to get on there, and then yeah, all that could be refined much better, really. Just a little bit of time and some polish. And those would come out good as new. I think for demonstration purposes, we're just going to leave them as is until you put the elbow grease in there to get those little imperfections out, and you'll see when we finish these how that shows in your finished product, all those little dimples. Okay, so all that's left now is the fun part, the bluing. We've got our hands all polished up and ready to go. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but let's see if I can get the light just right. There are still some imperfections on the edge of this boss. We have still some little dimples, and there's one on the side of the spade here that's been rather deep, and a little ding up there. If they're deep enough, or if they don't polish out, they're going to show in your finish in the end, any which way. Sometimes it just doesn't even blue down inside of those little dots and divots if you don't get them out. You really want to have a perfect finish if you want them to look their best. We've got a nice polish on them, and those imperfections will be good for example. So yeah, we've got those. We've got our alcohol burner and our bluing tray. The cap with the holes in it is for screws. So we're gonna get rid of that, and we're gonna go with the shavings. You really don't need a fancy bluing tray or anything. As you can see, I just whipped this one together out of an old clock pendulum and a brass tray. And the shavings, you know, it's nice, but not entirely necessary. I used to use this little piece of copper tray that I made. It's a piece of copper pipe I cut in half and hammered flat, and I gave it some shape with a grinder, and I just hold it with some long tweezers that are, you know, a reverso, so they hold it. And Bob's your uncle. Doesn't have to be too fancy, but can be. So it takes a little time. We'll do that. We'll do the minute hand first. Gonna nestle it in there a little bit so it's nice and even in those shavings. I do still want to be able to see it. Get that lit, and yeah, it takes a little time, and I hope this is a good angle that you can see at. In the interest of expediting this a little bit, I'm gonna give it a little help with my torch lighter here to get it up to temperature. It takes some time though, and it's best if you just go very slow and watch the color changes closely. And as soon as you've hit that color that you're looking for, you want to pull it right off. And you don't have to quench it or anything. It's such a tiny little piece of metal. As soon as you take it off the heat, it starts to go back to temperature. So let's see if I can get a little bit better light over here, maybe. There we go. The first thing that we're going to be looking for is it changing from polished white chrome look to gold. And it'll change to a pretty brilliant gold color and start getting darker. Starting to get that now. So watch for that, and then it's gonna turn to that plum color first. We'll go through some different stages of gold and darkening here. I hope this video is not going to be too long. I'm going to have to do one hand at a time. And see some color coming out on it now. It's starting to turn a deep brown. Starting to get some purple tones to it now. Turning that beautiful plum color that everybody loves. Yeah, that's light plum right now. If you give it a few seconds on there, it's going to richen up. And then it's going to start turning to that electric blue color. You can see a little bit of that in the stem right now. So here comes the blue. I'm watching that blue run through the hand. I want to make sure that it's getting to the heaviest, thickest parts are going to turn last, obviously, I would think, but you want to be careful not to go too far or it starts getting silvery. You can alleviate that a little bit. Anywhere you touch it with your tweezers, it will start to cool down and arrest the bluing. But you can't play around with that too much, obviously. You saw me twirling it around in there like, yeah, it's done. I don't know if you can see how blue that is now. We'll show them in the end. Okay. Pause. Okay, now we're gonna do it our hand. Put that in there. Things are already hot, so this will happen pretty fast relatively to the minute hand. So you really gotta watch it when you're doing multiple pieces. It's already turning cold. And it's starting to get dark and brownish, especially up at the, yeah, we got plum up here. Our spade is a little slow, and the neck too. Okay, starting to. That one may have had some residue on it or something. That turned very inconsistently. Not too sure. It's starting to come around though. It's evening out. That doesn't look bad. Okay. I'm gonna pull it. Pretty good. Okay, and I just want to be careful not to touch that because it's very hot. We'll review these here. Doesn't seem to want to focus too well on that, but they look pretty good. There are some dimples. I think our color took pretty well, with maybe the exception of the tip of that hour hand. Okay. Well, I think I was wrong. The tip of the hour hand looks just fine, although it's still a little plum colored, is why it is reflecting differently. These are just reflections. They look pretty good overall. There's definitely that pitting. There's a tiny speck in the stem of the hour hand that didn't blue, and that dimple that didn't want to come out. Still very evident there on the left hand side towards the tip of the spade. So all we want to do to finish these up really is to address that boss in the middle. Boy, that hole is a mess, huh? These are terrible hands anyway. But yeah, probably tape the hand over so we don't damage any of it, and then just stone that back to a polish. You don't even have to really go back in any grit or anything. You could just rub that with like a 7 or a 10,000 grit, and the blue will come off. The harder surface you finish it with, the cleaner and crisper your edges will be, I think, if that's not obvious. If you stone that with that sandpaper, it's got a little softness to it, so it'll roll the edges a little bit, and it won't look quite as crisp as a factory finish. A little tell, besides all the pits in it and the irregular hole. So yeah, if you have the harder surface, if you have a stone that's like 10,000 grit, that's the best way to hit that off. Keep the edges nice and crisp. So, but on this refinished one, and from an arm's length, nobody's ever going to notice that, or those tiny color variations. So we'll see how these come out in the end. Don't have a watch to put them on to show you. And there we have it. We're all done. We've gone and shined that back up. There's definitely still some imperfections in there. If you took the time to pay better attention to the detail, it would be better, obviously. There's a little bit of difference in the tone. You can see that the minute hand got a little warmer than the hour hand. Notice how it's a little bit more silvery blue than, it's barely discernible in person. It changes so much with the way the light hits it, you can barely tell. I can tell. And if I'd been paying close attention, I would have left the hour hand in just a little bit longer so that it was a better match. But I'm not going to do anything about that now. Okay, there you have it. Thanks for watching.